Last time we were talking about the 4 basic management functions, and I broke this video into 2 because it just got too long. Last time we discussed planning and organization. This time we're going to talk about leading and controlling. These are the 4 pieces, how they operate together in a quick summary. So we already covered these 2. Now we're going to talk about number 3 and 4. And you'll notice this is a continuous process. When we're done, we come back here and we start it all over again. Number 3 is leading, guiding, and motivating others. This is the 3rd key management function. We're down to here now. Leadership is the formal definition, guiding and motivating others towards an achievable organizational goal. A less formal definition is getting people to do what needs to be done. And because there are different types of people, they respond differently to different types of motivation. Leadership involves instructions on how to complete a task and also incentives to complete it quickly with quality. So it's just not telling Joe Bob to go do this. It is making sure Joe Bob has the skills to do it, and if not, making sure that he gets those skills. Effective leaders must be able to influence others' behavior. So we're going to talk about power in a moment, but yes, that's part of it. Initiative is the willingness to take action without being told. And if you're going to be an effective leader, an effective manager, this is a must. So it's easier just to let things slide along because change can be very scary and risky. I gave an example in another video where I connected 2 engineers who were working on the same exact thing, but they never talked to each other and they had totally different visions. I was not the manager. I just, out of my own volition, came up with the idea that we needed to all go to lunch together. And we started talking, and then they suddenly discovered that they needed to start communicating more closely. Okay, these are the types of powers that I mentioned earlier. Legitimate power, this comes from your job title. If you're CEO, you have 1 level of power. If you're a supervisor over a group of engineers, that's another level. Reward power is when you can motivate people by doing positive things, giving them a bonus. Coercive power is pretty much the opposite. It's your ability to have power over someone by, for example, firing them or removing a bonus. Expert power, this is very common among engineers. If you're the smartest engineer, people typically look up to you, and this is very common. Referent power, it's derived from an individual's charisma and their respect, so from past successes. This one can actually be a little bit dangerous because some people have charisma and they don't really have the expertise or the competence, and they will lead people away from a desired goal. Leadership styles. So we can categorize these in a few different ways. One of them is autocratic, and this is where the manager just keeps all the authority for decision making and employees have almost no input. So the manager just makes a decision and tells the employees what to do. My example is if managers believe that they're going to have to close a manufacturing plant because of losses, they may just do that without ever informing the workers. They may give the workers 2 weeks notice and say the plant is closed. This type of manager believes that workers cannot really offer a meaningful input to the decision making. And this is very typical in military and production line and lower skill education type jobs. Then there's the free-rein, which is also called laissez-faire. And so you give a lot of authority to the employees. It's the opposite of autocratic. And they communicate goals to the employees, but they allow the employee to figure out how to get the job done. So for example, the original Intel, a lot of high education jobs, and R&D labs, etc. So some more examples on free-rein. Managers may inform workers that the plant's performance must be improved or they're going to lose their jobs. So the workers are expected to implement an improvement of strategy on their own, to come up with their own ideas. Workers in this type of management style are expected to manage and motivate themselves on a daily basis. This does not mean that they're just given the right to do anything they want, but they are given more power within their job to do what they need to do. So you can ask yourself, so what's wrong with allowing employees to help make decisions? Well, yeah, what happens when critical decisions need to be made, like making layoffs? Yeah, if employees get too used to making those decisions, and then a tough decision has to be made, that will involve them that may cause problems. So yeah, what are the employees' expectations and feelings then? So this type of style can be very difficult to manage during hard times. So then there's participative, which is an in-between style, and it accepts some employee input, but then the manager has the final decision. It requires frequent communication between managers and employees. Managers, you allow your employee to give you input, but you don't pressure them to do so, and you don't pressure them to make the decisions. Frankly, this is the style I prefer. So I talk a lot with my employees. I make sure I understand their feelings, and then I integrate that into my decision-making process. But in the end, they don't get to vote on it. They don't get to make the decisions. Democratic type leaders. Now, this is another type of participative. They ask for group members' input, and then they allow the group to vote on it. You can see there could be problems on this. They can create division within the group. There are consensual leaders. They encourage discussion, but then they require everybody to come to a final agreement. And this is common with labor mediators. Consultative leaders. They confer with the subordinates before making a decision, but retain the final decision-making authority. Yeah, this is what I do. And it's often used to increase the productivity of assembly line workers. It is also necessary because, as I mentioned in earlier videos, that a lot of my jobs required me to do a turnaround situation. And so, yeah, I had to make some tough calls, and this works best for that. Then there's something called false-participative, and it is pretending to accept input from employees, but then you ignore it. And frankly, it's very common, especially with newer managers. And I can tell you that employees really resent it. They really hate it. And they will really resent the manager who uses it because they see it as being very manipulative. Yeah, the manager pretends like, yeah, I'm your buddy. You tell me, what you need, what you want, and then they just go off and ignore it. So this is just a general graphic on how the amount of authority is allocated. So going this way towards autocratic, most of it is held by the leader, by the boss, and the least amount going this way is by employees. So again, I prefer something more like in this range down in here. The most effective leadership style is going to depend on the employees. So for example, do they have a PhD or do they have minimal training? The complexity of the task. Are they assembly line or are they actually the people designing the circuit boards? And then the source of the leader's power. Does he have only a job title or does he have respect for the employees? And to me, this is something I need both. I prefer both. Stability of the environment, fast or slow change. In fast change environments, you may not have time to move things slowly, to ask opinions. You may have to just make hard decisions and put them out there. Employee empowerment. The formal definition is giving employees more self-control and discretion is basically power to make decisions and control over the resolution needed to implement those decisions. So my example is to allow assembly line workers the ability to choose their own teams, to slow the line if there's a problem, and maybe implement a stop line button if that's necessary. Corporate culture is very important whether you're a manager or you're an employee looking for a job, because the culture will affect very much how well you fit. The formal definition is the beliefs and behavior that guide how a company's management and employees interact both internally and externally. And this is based on the accumulated history of the organization, so how it grew up, the dominant leadership style in the organization. So is it autocratic or is it more laissez-faire? It depends on the heroes, the myths, the symbols, and ceremonies. So Hewlett-Packard, there's some books, good books on it, on the old days, and one of them was H.P. Way. There is a famous example of Hewlett and the tool cage. So Hewlett was working on something late at night. He needed some tools. He went over to the tool cage, but it was locked because the people had gone home. He got a bolt cutter, cut the lock off the bolt, put a sign up on the door that said, "Never lock this door again." And that literally changed the environment of the company. They had open stores and open tools from then on. Engineers did not have to work to a clock. They could come in on the weekends, whatever they needed to do. Okay, controlling, the fourth function. So how do organizations control their activities? Controlling the formal definition, processes, and activities that regulate, guide, and protect an organization. It is not just telling people what to do. This is the mistake of younger managers. Controlling doesn't just mean putting your thumb on a person and making it go. It includes monitoring a plan's implementation. Of course, people are part of that plan. You ask people to do things to make that plan happen, but it is not just pushing on people. It means monitoring the plan and correcting deviations from that plan to put it back on actual track. The control process is not to be confused with the managerial process. Performance standards/goals are based on strategic, tactical, and operational plans. The effective, and that's a key word, effective performance standards state an objective, measurable, behavioral goal, which is achievable in a specific time frame. So here are the 5 stages. So for example, you want widgets per day, you want sales per quarter, number of new product designs per year, something like that. The control process is very important, and it gives managers usable information on the status and success of the functions of planning, organizing, and leading. Yes, you have to know what's going on. It allows them to better direct employees' behavior towards achieving organizational goals. Maybe you have too many people on one part of an assembly line and you need them on another. Maybe they need training. A lot of history in the technology business where people had to come up to speed on new technology very quickly. Provides coordination of employees' activities and resource utilization within the organization. Who's doing what, how much is spent in each group, how much is being earned on that money which is spent. Here is an example on measuring and controlling. So first of all, managers have to measure actual performance and continually compare that to the standards they set. So actual performance, this is what happened, and a standard set, they should be in the plan. If you measure the wrong things, you're also controlling wrong. It's not going to work out. Some standards can be set company-wide, so the CEO may say we want 10% profit, while others are not going to work company-wide. They're only going to be specific departments, like we need to produce 10 widgets per hour, and that applies mostly to the production line. Some really good advice is you don't direct an orchestra one instrument at a time, so whether you're the CEO or a supervisor, you look across the whole group. So let's look at this. This is a very simplified version of a control function. You look at labor expense, you look at the actual. So this is what you in fact spent. Then you look at the standard that was expected from plan and you say, oh, that's excessive. And then you put something in works to make this go away. You want to put this back on track. Sales income, the actual was 1.2, you expected 900,000. Wow, okay, you're above target. That's good. You keep doing that. Delivery costs, the actual was almost 16,000. You expected 10,000 from the plan. That's excessive. You need to put in the works something to fix that. Production volume, actual level 5,000, standard from the plan. Okay, on target. Petty cash expense, $2,800. You expected from the plan 2,000, that's excessive. Maybe you need to look into why that costs too much. So that's the end of 4 management functions, part 2A and B, and now we'll go on to part 3.